In the dusty, dark depths of my channel, you guys, for the past couple of years, may have found a playlist. That playlist is called Guild Wars 2 Story Time, and today, we're going to pull that old box out of the garage, and we're going to start working on it again. It's actually going to get some updates, and I never really thought that it would, and certainly not right now. So what is this? Well, way back during Season 1 of the Living World mainly, Arenanet used to do something really quite cool that they stopped a fair while ago now, and apparently it was something that was dead and buried. This is the fact that they used to continue the story, put real lore on their website instead of just in-game. These short stories to have come back during Living World Season 1 were almost unanimously loved. Very well written, often, some of them a little bit better than others, but Arenanet eventually moved away from them. One of the reasons they may have moved away was the fact that the community did take issue with the fact this story was only accessible on the website rather than actually in-game, and that always seemed like a crying shame. I myself was very vocal of this fact, especially when considering how important and crucial the details some of these stories included, like Scarlet's story, which was the entirety of her background, when most players in-game really didn't even get that until Season 2, where they added some extra stuff with Snaf's machine and so forth. But for whatever reason, this or that, Arenanet did eventually stop doing these lore stories. They died out pretty much for Living World Season 2, and when we came to Heart of Thorns, all the patches before Heart of Thorns, all the patches since Heart of Thorns itself, no more stories. It seemed like it was something they'd moved away from. Well, today, or rather on Wednesday and also today, they resumed that. There are actually 2 parts now of a new story going up detailing what has happened to Taimi in Rata Novus. And just like I used to do in the old Guild Wars 2 Storytime playlist, I'm going to read those out for you guys. For those of you who prefer to listen to this maybe while you're alt-tabbed playing in game, you get the extra added atmosphere of the Rata Novus music and actual images of the related places on screen. And we'll even do a little bit of speculation about what that story could mean down below. I'm really happy about this. As much as we used to complain that this stuff wasn't in-game, I feel like at least it existing in some capacity at all is obviously better than not getting any stories in the first place. So, let's do it. Today I'm going to read to you guys notes from Rata Novus, written by Taimi. First, part 1, which was on Wednesday, and then second, part 2, which is today. Rata Novus log, entry number 8. This is bliss. I have to admit, when the commander left with the others, I was a tiny bit nervous about staying here by myself, but what a dream this turned out to be. I haven't slept in a week, and I don't want to sleep for at least another 2 or 3, maybe 4. Note, look into alternative to sleep. There's so much data here. This place could have been called Rata Novus. Note, does lack of sleep make you smart and hilarious? I think so. It feels like it'll almost be impossible to go through it all by myself, but the last thing I want is some other nosy researcher horning in on my work. So many theories are swirling around in my brain. I know I'm on the verge of something big. I just need time to draw some solid conclusions. One of the more remarkable things I discovered here is a replication, or maybe the original prototype, of the ley line map we found just outside Tarir. The magical network of ley energy is alive. It goes this way and then that way. One minute it's here, and the next minute it's over there. I had no idea it was in constant flux. Although I've had little contact with friends on the outside, I wouldn't need their input to tell you definitively that the commander's mission was successful. Morgemoth is no more. There was an intense light coming from that part of the jungle, and then one morning, I woke up and it had dimmed, and the rest of the map was lit up like a Lunar New Year fireworks show. I'm developing a system to track and log the flow of magic. I hope I can find some sort of pattern. I mean, it can't just be completely chaotic, can it? Or maybe it can. Maybe it has to be, but at the same time, maybe it can't be. Both arguments make an equal amount of sense to me right now. Note, investigate the impact of sleep deprivation on rational thought. I've observed that the egg chamber is definitely brighter than it was. Kaith told me she was going to check on the egg and make sure it was okay. No, of course she is. I have a hypothesis about her wild hunt, but I'll keep that to myself in case this journal ever gets away from me. If it does and you're reading it, Kaith, hi friend, you're the greatest and you always make the best decisions. Commander, if you're reading this, wink wink. Okay, I just reread those last sentences and it's possible, though not very plausible, I'm cracking up. Maybe I could use someone to talk to. but not a real someone. They just slow me down, or worse. Oh, I almost forgot about Scruffy. He's not a real someone. I miss the big guy. I'll have to formulate a new design for him. But do I have time to get sidetracked? No, I can't. Not now, at least. Anyway, I'm getting along just fine. Besides, I can always talk to my new friend, Plant. She's a beautiful little fern who sprouted from one of the cracks in the floor of the Dragon Lab. She's pretty cool, but quiet and green. Kind of like a shy Silvari. Note, does the number of sleepless nights correlate to the amount of new flora friendships? Conclusion? Highly probable, but who cares? New friends! Wait, what was that? If I didn't know better, I'd say it sounded like the gate powering up. Curious. Plant, keep an eye on my journal. I'll be right back. Okay, so that's part 1. Before we roll into part 2, I figure it's best to do a little bit of talk here. Obviously, not too much going on. It's thrilling to actually hear something about contemporary Tyria right now, especially when it involves the main characters and the first real bit of story we've had since the concluding moments of Heart of Thorns. There is a lot we can say already, even though on the surface it doesn't seem like too much is going on. The first thing I'd like to point out, we'll go in order as this journal goes along. The first thing to wonder about, guys, is what Taimi is actually trying to figure out. She mentions at the start that she's on the verge of coming to a big conclusion. What is it she's looking through? All this data, as we should remember, is from the Dragon Lab, which we very quickly approximated during the storyline of Heart of Thorns to have meant that each Elder Dragon has some kind of a weakness. Now, this is quite important that this story kind of alludes to Taimi coming to further conclusions on this idea, because that was, by and large, one of the biggest problems with Heart of Thorns at its release with the story. This problem of, hey, how do we kill an Elder Dragon, really wasn't answered too well in the Morgemoth arc, and in fact, this is one of those rare examples of we had a developer who'd worked on the personal story for Heart of Thorns coming online at one point. If you remember, I reported on it when it happened, specifically saying that they felt that was one of the areas that Heart of Thorns had been a little bit weak. And so if they also consider that that was an area that the story was weak, it makes sense that we're now getting a blog post here where Taimi may actually be able to give us some further embellishment on this, and that could be like a focus for the living world as we go forward, actually finding out what this big hypothesis Taimi has is about to come to. There's a couple of other really cool things as well. For example, Kaith being mentioned here. Kaith was a big part of Heart of Thorns, whether we could trust her or not, whether she had actually fallen to Morgemoth, whether she was just going to stab us in the back. She'd been questionable even before Heart of Thorns, and they played with that quite well throughout the story, but then it kind of ended all limply and fizzled out when it just seemed, oh no, Kate's fine anyway. And then it felt like that plot had been abandoned and that was going to be a little bit useless. But here we have, in the first new bit of story on the website, still casting questions over Kaith as to whether she is to be trusted or not. We hear she's hanging around the egg chamber a lot. Taimi has this theory about her new wild hunt. That's interesting to me already. I still feel like Arenanet need to be a little bit clearer about how Kaith's previous wild hunt concluded and how she got a new one. But I like that Kaith is front and center here because it means that those early stories in Heart of Thorns aren't over and might still actually have value because she could still be, you know, on the knife edge of whether we trust her or not, which is going to be pretty cool. Another little thing to focus on as well is what Taimi says about leyline energy. So the game had previously set up to us that there were these flows beneath the surface where lots of leyline energy would gather, and they sort of move around like currents, like deep sea currents in the real world, ocean currents. And they've always been really vague and non-specific about where these go, but I feel like our community has often taken any depiction of a leyline current far too specifically. So for example, when we had the end of season 1 and Morgemoth woke up and we got that cutscene showing leyline power sort of vaguely going towards the jungle, people took it as an asserted fact that there was absolutely, say, a leyline flow under and near the Thormanova reactor. And that works on multiple levels because the Thormanova reactor was genuinely factoring in that for its construction. But still, even when you have some of the more recent patches, the current event patches, people have been really looking close at where this leyline energy appears and trying to draw maps, seeing where might it be suggesting things go. I feel like this is Arenanet now trying to be even more explicit to the players that, hey, don't take it so serious where you're seeing where leyline flows are. You know, Taimi here is observing that they're moving all over the place, and you might be setting yourself up for disappointment if you overly scrutinize this facet of the plot. Maybe that's just me reading too deeply into what they're doing with the story here, but it seems at least a few other people would agree with me. Next, a very minor little note, but to point out the fact that this is actually Taimi's 8th journal. And that, to me, that might just seem like needless flavor to suggest she's been there for a while and we just skip to the good stuff or whatever. But I actually think that it seems we might read some of her other journals in-game. Remember, actually, that one of the old lore stories about the Zephyrite and their pursuits in the Crystal Desert did end up in-game, strewn about dry top through these little notes. And I don't think it would be too hard to get some kind of rudimentary access to Taimi's journal in Living World Season 3 actually there in-game. And maybe we would get the earlier of these logs. Who knows? Maybe that's just wishful thinking. And then lastly, of course, what the hell happened at the end there when the gate powered up? I'll have a link in the description and on the screen right now for you guys to my most recent video about Rata Novus, the mystery of Rata Novus, and what exactly could be going on here with Taimi. This is one of the biggest areas we were expecting Living World Season 3 to go in, and in that I speculated that maybe there were deeper areas of Rata Novus still populated by the old peoples of that city and just simply sealed away. And now here we have, curiously, and without Taimi actually wanting it to happen, one of the gates in the city powering up. Remember what the original story said, that this gate was old and it wasn't connected to the regular networks associated with the rest of the Asura. So who the hell could be coming through it? Well, I guess we get to find out straight away. You guys don't have to wait for the next blog post because it's already out. So here's notes from Rata Novus Part 2. This is entry log 9 from Taimi. They trampled plant! Those monsters! I knew my days of solitude were numbered here, but I didn't think they were this numbered. Word of Rata Novus' discovery must have hit Rata soon. Asura pouring in like migrating Doliacs. Although most Doliacs I know have better manners. How many times can a girl get bumped by someone setting up a research station before she snaps? The answer is 6. And then you scream, "Stop bumping into me while you're setting up your research station, Windle!" At which point everyone looks at you like you're crazy for some reason. Thankfully, when the interlopers arrived, I had a chance to shut the door to the Dragon research area before they got too deep into the lab, so no one knows about the really juicy stuff. I need to keep that as my surreptitious sanctuary. The question is how to get in and out of there unnoticed. Oh, maybe yes. No, that don't have... Well, yes? Okay, secret plan number 72. Let's call it Granted Access Teleport Expressway. Wink, wink. I'd been very careful about what I'd powered up to keep the chuck numbers down, but these mindless numbskulls are flipping switches left and right. History is bound to repeat itself at this rate. At least we know the causality of the Chak and their appetite for ley energy. I think the Rata Novans figured that out a little too late. The Chak are already popping up more often, so not only do I have to deal with Windle and his abnormally intrusive elbows, but now there are bug pieces everywhere. Have you ever stepped ankle deep into a pile of spiracles? It'll ruin your day. Granted, with me, it doesn't take much to be ankle deep, but still! On the plus side, I'm getting quite familiar with Chak anatomy, which will come in handy in our next Chak anatomy trivia night. Note, organise a Chak anatomy trivia night. The only other benefit to come out of this influx of Doliacs is the news from the outside world is flowing in more regularly. I heard Bram is back in Holbrak. Breaks my heart to think what he's going through. I should make my way up there to pay my respects soon. I've been working on a remote communicator based on some research here that uses leyline network to transmit your voice. Maybe I can hide it in the lab and talk into my end every once in a while so that people think they hear me buzzing around? I've worked too hard to lose my alpha status here. On the other hand, I could also use it to make them think this place is haunted. That's a good option too. We'll see. Speaking of ghosts that need to be laid to rest, a lot of these new incomers still harbour a healthy amount of distrust for where the Sylvari are concerned. I mean, Mordramoth was dispatched, what more do they want? How can you be told what to do when there's no one to tell you what to do? At least, I think that's the way it works. When Kaith was here, she said the call was gone, and she had even heard of new Sylvari being born after Mordramoth's death, which means the dream is alive and... Oh, for the love of eternal alchemy! Wendell just bumped me again! I gotta take a Doliac to Mana School. Be back soon. And there we go. That's the end of number 2. Number 2 actually both posts actually came with a single screenshot. The second one from post number 2, if you look at here, I actually really liked the idea that I guess that all these Asura actually shopped in I think they probably were, unless Arenanet actually created an instance of Rata Novus where they spawned a ton of Asura. We do know that they could sort of do stuff like that, as we saw in that stream where they put one of the raid bosses, Slothazor, actually out in Verdant Brink. This is really cool, the idea that suddenly there's loads of Rata Sum Asura exploring the old city. Let's go step by step. Now, yes, of course, this does mean, unfortunately, on the other hand, that these aren't the Rata Novans themselves. The post doesn't really go to explain how the two different Asura Gate networks, the old one from Rata Novus and the new one from Rata Sum, were connected, or why it was a surprise from Taimi when that happened. You'd expect maybe a technician would have to come to this gate here to spruce it up a little, but hey, I guess we might just be glossing over that somehow. The fact that there are tons of Asura here as well is kind of interesting in terms of the game's mechanics, because you might be thinking, wow, in Season 3, does this mean that the next patch that goes out, they're gonna revamp how Novus looks in-game? Well, I'm actually not so sure about that. I'm not sure about it because they've kind of well established here that the Heart of Thorns maps are in this floating timeline. They weren't scared to have, say, Lord Farron or Bagarth and so on in Verdant Brink, because I think that they're just expecting the players to understand that this is like frozen in time now, and Lord Farron and Bagarth and so on, they can still appear elsewhere. And that means I think the version of Rata Novus we see as a Heart of Thorns map right now might just stay that way. I doubt that they'd make sweeping changes to the meta, especially when it's all so closely tied to the entire city sort of being overrun by Chark every now and then. It just wouldn't work very well. And so this actually leads me then even further onto why they may have written these blog posts in the first place. See, the fact that maybe Rata Novus itself won't change too much might mean that really Taimi doesn't feature too much in this first update of the Living World at all. It reminds me a little bit of before Heart of Thorns came out, when they did that Exalted blog post where they gave us a lot of information about the Exalted, presumably because the game itself wasn't filling in those gaps too well. And many of us were expecting some Taimi prominence in the first patch, and maybe the devs realized, well, she's not going to get much of a look in Edgewise, so how about we do these blog posts talking about what's going with her instead? I don't know, it's just speculation. We might actually get the patch and find out that there's a huge amount of Rata Novus going on, that we meet Taimi there constantly, that it just happens in personal story instances, and that's where we see all of the Asura, and none of that really matters. Either way, I don't think I'll be too upset. Moving on, another very cool thing that this post seems to talk about is the development of, telecommunications, right? We're talking about the internet, maybe? I don't know. The telephone system seems more likely, where Taimi can actually transmit her voice through ley line networks. That combined with the handy bit of information from the previous blog post, which kind of allows us to imagine ley line flows anywhere the hell we damn well want. We might actually see Taimi now is able to talk to us wherever we are, like properly talk to us. Think a little bit, I guess, of Dessa in Fractals of the Mist, except it would be Taimi's voice, and she'd be able to do this to anywhere on the Tyrian overworld. That is quite useful as a storytelling tool for the developers. Right now, they're pretty much limited into only being able to communicate with us through mails, but if this system catches on, Taimi uses it a reasonable amount, and then later on, lots of characters end up using it, we might start to see that they can give us information from key characters wherever we are in the game without having to spam us with story-based mails that a lot of players will just skip because they don't like walls of text, as we're all very much familiar with. So we could be seeing the seeds planted for that, and that would be kind of interesting if that's kind of the direction they're going in. The other really big thing to come of this, of course, was that the Pale Tree's alive. See, in these two blog posts, as simple as they might look, they've actually touched on some of the biggest things that Heart of Thorns needed to in its concluding moments. The fate of the Pale Tree was a huge thing hanging in the balance that just wasn't touched on at all. There is an obvious suggestion here then that the Pale Tree has not just survived, but she's began to heal too, that the dream is repairing itself. The dream, though kind of psychic in the nature and obviously inherited from the fact that the Pale Tree comes from an Elder Dragon of Mind, the dream is able to exist without Morgemoth. It doesn't have Morgemoth tapping into it anymore, and new Sylvari are starting to be born as well. I think actually, funnily enough, that's indirectly suggesting there were no Sylvari being born during the events of Heart of Thorns, which was never explicitly stated before, but is an interesting fact to consider. And of course, there are still more questions about the dream, what's going on with the nightmare side of the dream, the nightmare court in particular, but all in good time, I suppose. But we've seen the dream, we've seen the Pale Tree, we've seen a little bit about Kaith and the fact that she's doing stuff. We hear, sadly, as well, about Bram grieving his mother in Holbrack, and actually, of everything we've heard so far, I'd put my money on that being the start of Living World Season 3. Some kind of instance back in Holbrook where we get to give Heirs to Galkin a genuine good send-off. That would be pretty nice, and maybe while they're at it, they can update the little home instance there as well, so that she's still not just wandering around, apparently alive, even though we've completed Heartthorns. That would be pretty cool. And that's about it. I don't really have too much else to say about the post so far, except that I love that they're here. I'm really happy we're getting the story going. It really drives home the fact, guys, that we're getting the story continued soon enough with Living World Season 3. There's really not too much to pick at, except the fact that maybe Windle sounds like a very weird name for an Asura. But hey, that's fine, I suppose. I will keep you guys up to date with any more blog posts like this that Arenanet throw out. I'm super happy that they're doing this once again. And until next time, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. To see his father in this state, and was afraid of what it all meant. Borge turned his palm up and spread his thick, worn fingers. Come here. Bare feet silent on the pine floor, Brahim crossed the distance to stand beside the fur-covered bed. He made every effort to sound strong as he said, "I'm here." He put his small hand on his father's arm. His skin stood starkly against his father's darker tone. He'd been told he was a mix of light and dark, his mother having had snowy skin and